Too big for me. But I'll try. The rich woman whispered to the giant cowboy. The land stretched far and quiet under the late winter sun, its silence broken only by the wind whispering through brittle grass. Snow had melted days ago, leaving behind muddy ruts and the soft scent of earth trying to breathe again. A black crow sat on the crooked fence post, watching the long dirt road like it was waiting for something that never came. Clayton Baird, a man built like a mountain, stood on his porch with a coffee cup that looked too small in his large hands. He didn't drink it. He only held it, warming his fingers as he stared at nothing. His shadow fell long across the porch floorboards. His face was lined, sunburned, and mostly unreadable, except for the sorrow tucked quietly between his brows. The ranch hadn't heard a woman's voice in 3 years, not since Lily passed. And then it came. Not a voice, not at first. Just the sound of tires crackling over gravel. Unfamiliar tires, moving slow, like they didn't belong there. He turned his head toward the sound, cautious, but calm. A black car, glossy, clean, and utterly wrong for this landscape, crept down the road, like it was scared of the dust. It stopped. The door opened. A woman stepped out. She wore high heels, ivory, expensive, which immediately sank into the mud like they regretted their life choices. Her coat was cream-colored wool, not made for wind or dirt. Her gold earrings glinted when she pushed back her dark curls, her eyes scanning the ranch house like she'd just walked into another planet. She didn't belong there. Everything about her screamed polished city wealth, the kind of woman who had never seen blood on a barn floor or buried a calf at midnight. And yet, she stood her ground. Clayton didn't speak, didn't wave. He only watched as she limped up the path, holding her suitcase awkwardly, one heel beside, broken off and clenched in her hand like a weapon. There was no driver, no entourage, just her. She stopped at the steps. He raised an eyebrow. She spoke. Her voice was soft, nervous, like a violin string stretched too tight. "Are you Mr. Baird?" He nodded. "I need to stay here, just for a little while." Clayton stared, said nothing, but something in her tone, not the words, but the way they trembled, made him shift slightly. She didn't cry, but her eyes were glassy, and her hand trembled when she touched the rail. She wasn't here for a visit. She was here because she had nowhere else to go. And that's when he noticed the bruise under her left eye. Clayton didn't move. He just watched her. This strange, expensive woman standing on his porch like a wilting flower in a hailstorm. Her breath was shallow. Her eyes stayed on him, but not quite, like she was watching something behind his shoulder, something that had followed her here. The wind caught her coat and blew it open just enough for him to see the bruise that ran from her collarbone down toward the edge of her chest. She caught the coat quickly and clutched it closed. He looked away, not out of shame, out of memory. There had been bruises like that once, on Lily. Not from him, never from him, but from the life she had before the cancer, before the ranch, before they found peace in silence. Clayton had once watched her flinch at the sound of a slammed door for nearly a year before she told him why. Now, this woman stood there breathing the same kind of fear. She didn't ask again. She didn't beg. That struck him harder than words would have. She simply stood, shaking, trying to pretend she wasn't. A woman who looked like money, but carried herself like a ghost. There was something in her silence that stirred something buried in his gut, something angry, something tender. He stepped back, left the door open. She followed, without a word. Inside, the ranch house was simple, warm, wood stove burning low. The floor creaked under her heels. She paused like she was about to apologize for existing, then sank into the edge of the worn couch, one hand still gripping the broken heel. Clayton poured coffee into another cup, slid it across the table. Still no words. She reached with both hands. Her fingers trembled too much to lift it steady, and some of it spilled on her lap. She flinched again, not from the heat, but like she expected to be punished for it. Clayton looked away. He didn't ask her name, didn't want to make her speak yet. But as he stared at the wall, the same spot where Lily's photo once hung, he felt the weight of it all settle on his chest like a haystack. The bruises, the shaking, the silence, the need. He didn't want this, didn't want to open doors that were better left shut. But he also knew what happened when no one opened the door. Lily had told him once before she died, if someone had just let me stay, just for one night, I wouldn't have gone back. Clayton looked at the woman again. She wasn't crying, but something in her face begged for stillness, safety, space. He walked to the closet, pulled out a folded blanket and placed it gently beside her. Then he pointed to the guest room down the hallway. She looked up, stunned. I'll be gone by morning, she whispered. He didn't answer, just turned and walked away. Boots heavy on wood. Silence, louder than any promise. But the door to the guest room was already open. Morning came hard. A low fog clung to the fields like ghosts reluctant to leave. Cows bawled in the distance, and the old rooster did his job late. Clayton had already fed the horses and repaired half the fence before he saw her again. She stood in the doorway of the barn, barefoot, arms wrapped around herself. Her eyes looked less swollen, but her silence was the same. It wasn't the silence of pride. It was the silence of someone who had learned words could be used against her. I can help, she said softly. Clayton didn't turn. Help with what? She didn't answer right away. Just stepped inside and picked up a bale of hay like she meant it, even though her arms trembled with the effort. He took it from her without a word. By afternoon they had spoken only twice, but something had shifted. She stood straighter. He watched more closely. And that's when the car came. Not like hers. No, this one was cheap, sun-bleached and fast. It didn't creep down the road, but it roared, kicking dust high into the air, a black sedan with mismatched tires and one busted headlight. Clayton saw it from the ridge and didn't like the way it moved. She saw it too. The color drained from her face. She didn't say a name. Didn't need to. Whoever it was, they weren't just looking. They were coming. Clayton stepped forward, slow and deliberate. She clutched the barn post like it was the only thing keeping her upright. It's him, she whispered. I told him I wouldn't stay. I left the money. All of it. But he won't let go. Who? My husband, she said. He's not just rich. He's dangerous. Clayton didn't blink. She looked at him now like she expected him to tell her to go, to say she was too much trouble, to walk away the way others had. Instead, he asked, "He know you're here?" She hesitated, then nodded. "I used the car he gave me. His men have GPS on everything." Of course they did. Rich men didn't lose things. They hunted them down. Clayton ran a hand over his beard, thinking. The car had turned off the main road now, headed toward the ridge, maybe 15 minutes away. "You got any papers on you?" he asked. She shook her head. "Just cash. No name. No ID. No proof she even existed outside the bruises on her skin." He felt something twist in his chest. "Go back inside," he said. "Take the stairs to the attic. Don't come down. But don't argue." She went. He watched her run, barefoot, heart pounding, the sound of tires getting closer. Back inside the barn, Clayton opened an old chest buried under feed sacks. Inside, a rusted shotgun, a box of shells, and something even older than both, his father's. Badge, still polished, still heavy. He hadn't worn it in years. But some kinds of trouble didn't care about county lines. Clayton slipped the badge into his coat pocket. Then he stepped outside to wait. The man never got out of the car. He circled the ranch once, engine snarling, then disappeared into the dust. But that wasn't the end, just the warning. The next day, Clayton parked her car behind the hay barn, out of sight. He cut the GPS wires himself, tossed the tracker into the creek. Then they waited. Time moved slower after that, quieter. But it wasn't peace. It was the breath you take before the blow lands. She stayed. Didn't ask when she should leave. He didn't ask her to. Each morning she followed him into the fields, tying back her curls with twine and learning how to keep up in boots too big for her feet. She never complained, not once. When she tried to lift a feed sack and nearly dropped it, he took it from her, gently, and set it down beside her instead of on top. She gave a tired smile, the kind you give when you're not used to kindness. In the evenings they shared dinner, quiet meals of beans, biscuits, and the occasional slice of smoked meat. She peeled potatoes. He chopped wood. No radio, no TV, just wind and fire and the sound of forks scraping tin plates. One night she stood at the back of the barn, watching the moon rise behind the distant ridge. He walked up behind her, carrying a rifle. "Ever shoot before?" he asked. She shook her head. He didn't ask why. He just handed it to her. She held it wrong, awkward and stiff. He stepped behind her, adjusting her hands, steadying her shoulders. His fingers brushed hers, large, calloused, warm. She didn't pull away. They fired once. The echo rolled across the hills. A crow startled from a tree. Then, silence. She lowered the rifle slowly. "I never thought I'd feel safe holding one," she said. He don't answer. But she turned toward him. And for the first time, she looked at him. Truly looked. Not as a stranger, not as a protector, but as a man. His face was lined with old storms, his eyes heavy with things unsaid. She reached up, almost without thinking, and touched the scar on his jaw. "What happened?" "Bar fight. Long time ago." "Did you win?" "I lost. But I kept the scar." She smiled. He looked down, quiet. "I once threw a wine bottle at the wall," she said softly. "I was alone. I just wanted to hear something break that wasn't me." He didn't reply, just nodded once, like he understood far too well. That night, she left the door to the guest room open. Not as an invitation, just as a gesture. A quiet way of saying, "You've given me safety. Here's a little of mine." He didn't step inside, but he stood in the hall a long time, just listening to her breathe. For two broken people, that was more intimacy than any kiss could carry. And somewhere in that silence, they began to heal. Not with grand gestures, but with quiet presence. They came just before sundown. 3 men, 2 in suits, 1 in boots. A black SUV rolled up the gravel drive, kicking dust into the twilight. No license plate on the front. Tinted windows. Big men, with the stiff posture of those who think they own the air. Clayton stood by the barn, hands dirty from work, eyes calm. He didn't move when the doors opened. The first man out was clean-cut, smooth voice, city confidence. The second was bulkier, sunglasses, jaw clenched. The third never spoke, but he scanned the ranch like a hunter. "Mr. Baird?" the clean-cut one asked. Clayton didn't answer. "We're here on behalf of Mr. Whitmore. You have something that belongs to him." At that moment, she stepped out onto the porch. Too fast. Too visible. Clayton's heart dropped as her silhouette appeared in the doorway. She looked different now. Not like a victim, but like someone ready to be brave. Still, her hands trembled behind the railing. "Get back inside," Clayton said. Quiet, firm. But she didn't. She's not property, he growled. The man smiled. Mr. Whitmore disagrees. She's his wife, his legal wife. You're harboring her on private land, interfering in family affairs. The man in sunglasses stepped forward. The third pulled back his coat just enough to reveal the grip of a pistol. Clayton didn't flinch. She got bruises, he said. You want to talk law? Let's start with that. She has no proof, the clean-cut man replied. No photos, no reports, just stories. And your word doesn't count for much out here. Clayton's eyes narrowed. His hand drifted slowly into his coat. Not for the gun, for the badge. He held it up. Rusty, old, but still real. Clayton Baird, retired deputy. This here's my land. You're on it without cause. A pause. The men exchanged glances. Then the third man drew. Fast. But Clayton was faster. The shotgun cracked like thunder. One blast into the dirt just inches from the man's boots. Dust exploded. Horses screamed in the barn. The man stumbled back. Gun not fired. Eyes wide. I'll shoot the next one dead, Clayton said. You make another move, and I promise you'll be dragging bodies home tonight. They backed up. Slow. Hands raised. Mr. Whitmore doesn't forget, the smooth one warned, voice shaky now. You've just bought yourself a war. Clayton's voice was gravel. Then tell him I ain't afraid of dying. But I sure as hell am afraid of letting her go back to hell. They left. The SUV roared away into the darkness. But the air didn't relax. Clayton turned. She stood by the porch, breath shallow, face pale. You could have let them take me, she whispered. I could have, he said. But you didn't. He looked down. Too big for you, maybe. But you still tried. Her eyes filled with tears, but none fell. And in that moment, something unspoken passed between them. Not love, not yet, but something harder earned, something worth bleeding for. The SUV never came back. But others did. Unmarked sedans, men who watched from the ridge, legal envelopes left at the gate. No more guns, no more threats in the open. Just pressure, paperwork, eyes in the shadows. Clayton didn't speak much during those days. He reinforced the fences, walked the perimeter at dusk, loaded his rifle before bed, every night. She didn't run this time. Instead, she stayed close. Not out of fear, out of defiance. She helped mend broken boards, cooked more, waited longer. Her fear turned into something sharper, something almost like courage. Until the letter came. A formal notice. Her husband had filed for full ownership of all shared property, claiming abandonment, mental instability, and theft. He called her unfit to manage herself, citing her emotional episodes and manipulation of vulnerable men. He never mentioned the bruises. She sat on the porch, holding that letter like it burned her fingers. Her hands didn't shake anymore, but her eyes were hollow again, like something had crumbled inside. Clayton sat beside her. The silence stretched long. I have to leave, she finally said. He didn't look at her, just stared out toward the hills. If I stay, he'll bury you in lawsuits, in lies. He'll destroy the ranch just to punish me. Still, he said nothing. I can't do that to you. The wind rustled the wheat. Somewhere far off, a dog barked. The sun dipped lower, bleeding into the earth. I don't want to go back, she whispered. But if I keep hiding, he wins. Clayton stood slowly, walked down the steps, picked up her suitcase from the barn where it had been gathering dust. She followed. They didn't speak during the drive to the station. She sat stiff in the passenger seat, fingers folded tight in her lap. The bruise on her collarbone had faded now, just a shadow of what it once was, but some scars weren't meant to be seen. At the depot, The train waited like a promise no Ashikir could trust. He lifted her suitcase with one hand and set it by the bench. She turned to him, eyes rimmed red, mouth set hard. "I'll be back," she said, "when it's over." Clayton nodded once. "You won't have to save me next time." He looked at her then. Really looked. "You already saved yourself." The train hissed. The moment was too quiet to hold all the weight between them. She stepped forward, wrapped her arms around his waist. He didn't move at first. Then his arms came around her. Not tight, not needy, just steady. Like home. She boarded the train without looking back. He stood there until the last car disappeared into the dusk. Then he turned, walked back to the truck. Alone again, but not broken. Spring turned to summer, then fall. The ranch stayed quiet, like it always had, but something subtle had changed. The porch didn't feel as empty. The guest room stayed swept. A second mug joined Clayton's on the shelf, even if it never got used. She never called, never wrote. But every day he checked the mailbox anyway, not in hope, in habit. The town had heard whispers, of course, they always did, that the big cowboy had taken in some fancy city woman, that she'd vanished just as suddenly. Some thought she used him, others thought he drove her away. But Clayton never corrected them. Truth was heavier than gossip. So he worked. Fenced in the southern pasture, painted the barn doors for the first time in 5 years, replaced the rotting swing under the elm tree, though he never sat in it. One evening, after a long day mending the cattle chute, he sat alone by the fire. The stars blinked above like old friends keeping watch. The wind was colder now, sharper. Winter was coming back. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out something he'd almost forgotten was there. The letter she left in the glove compartment. He opened it slowly. "If I find my name again, I'll come back with it. Until then, know this. No man ever gave me a choice before you. And that is love, even if no one else calls it that." He folded it gently, set it on the table, poured himself a coffee. Some nights he thought of what he might say if she returned. He imagined her stepping off a train, hair tangled, coat dusty, but eyes clear, not needing rescue, just wanting to be somewhere safe. Not broken, just tired. And he'd open the door, the same way he did the first time. Only this time, he'd speak. Only this time, he might say, "You're home." But for now, he stayed quiet. Let the fire crackle. Watch the wind bend the wheat like it was bowing towards something sacred. And in that stillness, in that quiet ranch house, with its creaking floorboards and scarred walls, a new kind of peace settled. Not because the pain was gone, but because something stronger had taken its place. A memory. A promise. And the porch light, for the first time in years, stayed on all night. Some love doesn't stay, but it leaves the door open, just wide enough for healing to walk through.